Welcome back, second grade. Welcome to our second day of learning for Wit and Wisdom. We are ready to dive into our second virtual lesson together. But first, before we start our lesson today, I wanted to share with you a little bit about my learning space at home while we are learning remotely together. I have tried to have a quiet space to concentrate. However, you all might know that sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge when we are all home together with our entire family. Yesterday, you might have heard my dog barking in the background a little bit together. Well, she loves to learn and always wants to be here with me together. So I thought it might be fun for us to have her be our learning partner for today. So let me introduce you to our learning partner, Coco. This is my dog, Coco, and she loves to learn. Of course, she is not a very strong reader, but she is a really great listener and loves to snuggle with me and read and listen to my kids read as much as possible. So, in this learning time together, I would love it because I can't be with you and hear all of your great stories. If you have a photograph of you and your pet learning together, or you and your family learning together, that you would like to share with me, I would love to see it. So take a picture if you want, and you can email it to me. It's lkippes, Kippes, at topamail.com. Send it to me, and all of your pictures at the end of the week, I will put them into a little slideshow and share them with all of us so we can kind of see what we're all doing during this time when we're not at school together, so we can kind of stay in touch. So I thought that might be kind of fun. Anyways, let's get back into our lesson for today and see what we are going to learn. Let me get our PowerPoint ready for the day and see what that means. Today, I am hopefully going to get faster at this the more we practice as we move on. So before we get started, just a few more things to remind you of things we might need for, wrong direction, things we might need for today. You will try and need to find a quiet space that you can concentrate in to do your work, not just for my class, but for all of your learning. A paper or notebook to write with and a pencil. A folder or a place to keep your work. So if you have work you started yesterday at our lesson, you'll want to pull that back out and have it ready for today. And you'll also need a learning partner to help you with your technology and discuss your work. I am here to discuss with you. Hopefully you have someone at home that you can talk with. I may just talk with Coco, the dog. She probably won't have a lot of great stuff to share, but we shall see. Now might be a good time to pause this video if you need to get your supplies before we learn this lesson. One last thing, make sure as we get started for today that you get ready to learn and you're ready to enjoy what we are doing together. So take a deep breath, be ready to think, share your ideas with your learning partner, try and stay focused, and look forward to the lesson that we are learning today. Let's start learning together. Today, some of the goals that we have together are going to be to examine some shapes. We are going to look back at the photograph that we looked at yesterday of the people marching, and we are going to look at the shapes and color of the photograph in a piece of artwork and help see if that can help us understand its meaning. We are going to practice again, this time with some writing, to understand why we need to use capitalization, punctuation, and spacing in sentence. See if we can identify those errors and correct them on our own. We are going to write a sentence or two about the meaning of the photograph, and we are going to practice reading a passage fluently with expression. Sounds like fun. Let's see. Oops. I keep going the wrong direction. Here we go. Just to remind you, this week, we are also thinking this entire week about how can we answer this question, our big question, how will we learn together virtually? So yesterday, a few things that we learned about learning virtually. We learned that we need to have a quiet space. We need to have our supplies ready to go before we start our lesson. And we need to be ready to share with a learning partner or jot down our notes on paper. Okay. So today we are going to start working on the reveal section of our lesson. So as we reveal a deeper meaning of our lesson, I'm going to ask you to put on your detective hat and get out your magnifying glass so you can look more closely at the photograph and see if you can help determine its meaning. Okay, we are going to look at a short video together before we discuss this in greater detail. So let's watch this little video and see what we learn about this photograph. I think you will find it interesting. It might be some new facts that you don't remember or you didn't learn in our class before we went to spring break. So let's see. I want us to start at a certain point in our video. Let's see. Oh, here we go.
Remember a new text and to learn how to work.
Hold on 1 second. We don't want to watch part of the video that we don't need. So there we go. I think this is where we need to start.
Each of the 5 content stages has a content framing question that guides learning. Today, we will work through the 3rd content stage, reveal. In a story, you might answer questions about the characters and setting. In a photograph, we can answer questions about the line, the color, and the shapes that we see. We can look at the colors the artist uses. We can look at the lines, and we can look at the shapes of the objects. When we look at the shapes, we can think about the positions and organization of the figures in the photograph. The content framing question for our learning in this reveal lesson is, what does a deeper exploration of shape and light reveal in this photograph? In reveal, we zoom in to 1 or 2 aspects of our text and think about the impact that has on our understanding. In this lesson, we'll look at the impact of the photographer's use of shape and light on how the viewer sees the photograph. Because we're learning virtually, after each TDQ or text-dependent question, I'll ask you to pause the video and share your response with your partner. I'll also share some responses from other students, so you'll have ideas to add to your understanding. Now, let's return to the photograph. This is a photograph of an important march led by Martin Luther King Jr. in 1965. They were protesting for African Americans' right to vote. The march lasted 5 days and spanned 54 miles from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. Thousands of protesters walked for 12 hours each day and slept in fields and homes along the way. When the marchers finally arrived to Montgomery, nearly 25,000 supporters joined them to protest on the steps of the state capitol. This photograph was taken by a photojournalist named James Corrales, who documented the civil rights movement for news magazines. During the last organized lesson, we looked at what was happening in terms of the setting and the people in the photograph. At the reveal stage, we're going to look at the shapes the photographer included in the photograph. Here's the question I want you to think about. What are the largest shapes in this photograph? Tell your partner the shapes you see. You can also point to where you see them. Now, I want you to think about what are the smallest shapes in this photograph? Tell your partner what you saw. To spot the shapes, you have to be like a detective and search the painting. Please pause while you talk to your partner about the largest shapes that you see and the smallest shapes that you see. I'm going to share some responses other students have given to these questions. Again, I'm sharing these to expand the conversation so you have more than your own ideas to consider. One student shared, the largest shapes that they see are the clouds. I just wanted to circle, here are the clouds, and that really does look like a large shape. The smallest shapes are the people and the flags. Here's one flag, here's another flag, and all the way over here, there's a really tiny flag. They also said that people are the smallest shapes. And I wanted to show you back here, there are also some people which look really, 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 really small. Tell your partner if you spotted any of these shapes in the photograph too. Now, we're going to look at another element the photographer used to get our attention. What light do you see in this painting? Which areas are darker and which are lighter? Please pause the video and tell your partner what you saw. You can also point to the darker and lighter spots. Now, I want you to think about our text-dependent question, or TDQ 4. How does the photographer's use of light convey a feeling or mood? To convey means to communicate or make an idea known. Just like a storyteller uses words to tell a story, a photographer uses light to communicate an idea, feeling, or mood to us, the viewers. How do you feel when you look at this painting and why? Please pause and discuss with your partner. Remember how I said that people have studied or examined this painting, not painting, that photograph, in different ways? Here are some responses from other students. The darkest areas are the large storm clouds. The lightest area is behind the marchers. So for the darker spot, the student said the clouds actually were darker. And some of the lightest areas were behind the marchers, right here. Two students noticed the dark clouds that seemed to be pressing down on the marchers, and one student felt that made the journey more difficult. Another student noticed the light behind the marchers, and this is the light that they're talking about, like right here, and also right here, and it made that student feel more hopeful. I wonder what you thought. If you want to look at the photo again, or show it to someone else in your family, or if you want to ask them questions about the shapes and the light and the feeling that it gives them, you can find it right here. Here is the link. Just to remind you, today we were working in the reveal stage. Our next content stage lesson will go into the distill stage and zoom back out to consider the big picture of this photograph. In the next part of this lesson, part 2, we're going to think about our writing skill using correct capitalization, spacing, and punctuation. So please stop, stand up and stretch, and I'll see you back for part 2.
Okay. Let's see. Well, that was an interesting lesson. Those were a few facts that I think we didn't necessarily all cover in our lessons about the photograph when we were in class together. Thinking about this photograph, I want you to think about a few other things that were happening during this time period. Look at these 2 vocabulary words. These are 2 words that we should all be somewhat familiar with. It may have been a while, but we should be familiar with these words from studying Module 3. One of the first words that we look at is the word injustice. Injustice means an act that is not fair. So something that is not fair that is happening to someone. In class, we had discussed that injustice is not just whether we're thinking if something is unfair at home. Like it might not be fair that we don't get to have a popsicle for our snack. Or I really want to have a cupcake and my mom won't let me have a cupcake today instead of eating a healthy lunch. That we may think that is not fair. That's not the type of injustice that we are thinking of. We are thinking about a greater injustice, such as a civil rights injustice that was happening in our book, The March to Washington, D.C., things that were happening with civil rights to the African American people in our country during this time period. Another injustice that was happening was segregation. Segregation is when we separate these people into different groups, especially by race or ability. Can you remember some of the other injustices that African Americans were protesting during this time period with Martin Luther King Jr.? I would like for you to take just a couple of minutes and pause the video and talk to your learning partner or jot down on your paper a few of the things that you can remember from our book, The March to Washington, and some of the videos that we watched in class that gave us examples of injustices that were happening during this time period. I will give you just a few moments to think about that. You can pause your video if you need to and write those things down. Some of the things that I remembered from our class discussions were that some of the injustices that were happening were Black and white children, we learned, could not go to the same school together. Restaurants and theaters and hotels were often segregated, meaning that Black and white people were not able to go to the same restaurants, theaters, and hotels together because of their skin color. Black people were not able to sit where they wanted to sit on a public bus when they needed to go to work or school or wherever they were traveling around town. Those were all 3 some examples of injustices that we had come up with as a class together. I would like to share with you some of the things with the photograph again. Look in this photograph and think about, how did the people in this picture respond to injustice? So not the people that were in our book necessarily, the examples we just talked about, but what were these people in the video specifically doing that we were responding to injustice? If you need to, you can always go back in the video and listen to the description again to get the details if you have forgotten or you want to clarify what you were learning in the video about this photograph. You might want to pause your video here and talk to your learning partner or write down a few ideas of what these people were doing to respond to injustice. If you said that you thought that these people were responding to injustices by marching from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama to protest the voting rights for African Americans in our country, you would be correct. Similar to the people who went to Washington to listen to Martin Luther King Jr. Talk about the other civil rights that were having injustices during this period of time, such as segregation and children who couldn't learn or play together. These people were also responding by marching, we heard, in a very long line that went from 2 cities to go to their capital to protest the right to vote in our country. Voting is a very important civil right that all of people in our country have, so that we can choose our leaders that are governing our country and making the laws for us. That ends us with our first section. Let's take a quick brain break and clear our head and be ready to jump into part 2 of our lesson. So stand up, take a little stretch, and let's try another quick video with Catman. In case you haven't known already, if you were in my class, I am a fan of Catman and his brain breaks and his skills that we learned together. So let's hear from Catman. I'll see if I can do it with you.
With Mr. Catman. I to the L.
Meow.
Mr. Catman's desk is a mess. What a catastrophe. Hold your pinky on one hand up like Mr. Catman. On the other hand, make the letter L with your thumb and index finger. Meow. At the same time, switch your pinky to the L and the L to the pinky.
Ooh. See if you can do this with me.
Slowly at first.
This will help us focus our learning
You
and
got
our brain
it.
power.
Switch your pinky to the L and the L to your pinky.
Okay.
Try it a little faster.
Ooh, how fast can you do it? See if you can do it very quickly. Oh, I can't do it very quickly.
This is possibly one of the most difficult exercises.
Here we
Why?
go, second grade.
Because Mr. Catman likes to challenge your brain. But it's all good. Because practice makes perfect.
Ooh, perfect.
Real.
Just like your writing and reading skills. Practice makes perfect with Mr. Catman. Meow. Okay. All right. Give yourself a stretch, take a deep breath, and be ready to move on to our next part of our learning. Okay, we are going to move on. This time, I want you to think about a time that you had to practice something to get better. Okay, so take just a moment and think about that. Share with your learning partner when was a time that you had to practice something to get better. I can think of lots of things that I had to practice and I still have to practice to get better. Writing is one of those things that we all need to practice together, myself included sometimes. Writing is just like jumping rope or riding a bike or playing a game. It is something that we have to practice over and over again to get better, not just sometimes, but a lot. If we want to be a very skilled writer, we are going to have to practice a lot. I am going to have you watch a short video to help guide us through recognizing some of the things that we can correct when we are looking at capitalization, punctuation, and spacing in our writing. Let's look at this video. Hold on, I want us to watch part 2. And like I said before, we don't need to watch the introduction. I just want you to watch just a little part of this video. It's the most important part that's going to help us practice editing some sentences that have mistakes with writing in them. Here we go.
Today's craft question is, how does using correct capitalization, spacing, and punctuation work? We will get to practice adding correct capitalization, spacing, and punctuation to a sentence. Let's take a look at an example from our last lesson. Remember, we discussed that using correct capitalization, spacing, and punctuation made reading sentences easier because you could read each word because there were spaces between them, and you could see where one sentence ended and the next sentence started. Now let's look at how the writer used correct capitalization, spacing, and punctuation. Here's our example. Can you point to the capital letters at the beginning of the sentences? Can you spot the spaces between the words? Can you find the periods at the end of the sentences? Pause the video and point to examples of correct capitalization, spacing, and punctuation. Let's look together. For our correct capitalization, you should have noted this letter and this letter. For spacing, you should have noted the spaces between words, including the space here, 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 and here for the first sentence, and here, 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 and here for the second sentence. Did you also notice that there is a space between the punctuation of the first sentence and the capital for the second sentence? Great work. Finally, did you also notice the punctuation marks here and here? Awesome work. Here are all of the things put together: capitalization, spaces, punctuation, space, capitalization, spaces in between words, and punctuation. Now you try it. Look at the sentences that I have on the screen. Do you see any spots where a capital letter or punctuation mark is needed? I'm sorry, I'm not sure why that's clicking. Okay, pause the video now so that you can experiment and try it for yourself by finding where a capital letter, space, or punctuation mark is needed. Okay, did you find the place where a capital letter is missing? Share with your partner. Once you find it, stand up or wave your arms.
I found
Did
the
you find
space,
the
did you?
place? And I'm sorry, let me go back. When we were looking at the capital letter that was missing, hopefully you noted that it was right here. That's where we needed the capital letter. Did you find the place or space where we needed some space between two words where that was missing? Hopefully you found the space right here.
I see the space.
If you found it, stand up and do the floss or any other dance move that you like.
Okay.
Finally, did you find the place where the punctuation mark was missing? Hopefully, you noticed right here that we needed a period. If you found it, stand up or give yourself a big high five.
High five to
Great
all
work,
of my
friends.
scholars who found the period spot.
Oops, sorry.
You will have a chance to practice filling in some of these sentences and finding the errors in our exit ticket today.
Here's what it should look like. Here's how you can use correct capitalization, spacing, and punctuation in a sentence. Remember, doing this makes it easier to read the sentences you write. We have completed the second craft stage, experimenting with using correct capitalization, spacing, and punctuation. As you are writing throughout your day, try to use correct capitalization, spacing, and punctuation. Remember, it's going to take practice to get really good. In our next lessons, we will continue to think about why using correct capitalization, spacing, and punctuation is important. As we do that, we'll use Wit and Wisdom's craft stages to help us learn and sharpen this skill. We will work through the last two craft stages. In the execute stage, we will try to put what we've learned to work in our own writing. And in the Excel stage, we will take a look at what we wrote to see how we can improve it.
Okay, nice work, scholars. Like I said earlier, you will have the chance to be able to practice editing some of these sentences on your own in our exit ticket today on the Google form. So there will be a few questions for you and a few sentences that I will ask you to find the errors and correct those sentences for me so I can see that you have all mastered this part of our lesson today. One of the parts of our lessons before we went on spring break was for us to practice our fluency passages together. So one thing that we were working on together was reading a speech, or part of a speech, that was from Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. So a speech is not just a conversation or part of a story that we read. A speech is when you have something to read that is prepared that you are going to read to a group of people, such as Martin Luther King did when he had his march on Washington. When you're reading a speech to someone, it's not just important that you can read it fluently. but it's important that you are able to use proper phrasing and expression in your voice, so that you're able to motivate people or give them a sense of your mood or feeling of what it is that you are talking about. So think back to Martin Luther King and what his mood was and what he was trying to motivate people to do with his speech. If you said that he thought he was trying to motivate people to change civil rights in our country so that all of us would be seen as equal Americans, you would be correct. So for now, I want you to pretend that you are going to be Martin Luther King, and you are going to perform this part of the speech to your learning partner today. First, I am going to read the speech to you so you can hear what I am referring to when we talk about using proper phrasing and expression. And then I'm going to have you pause the video and read it with expression and fluency and phrasing to your reading partner. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to move this little screen over just a little bit. Okay, fluency. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. Okay, scholars, I would like for you to pause the video where it's at and take a few moments to practice this fluency passage with your learning partner using proper phrasing, expression, and trying to convey your mood to motivate your reader. Okay, so pause your video and read to your partner. I am sure that you all were doing fabulous at your reading. I wish that I could have heard you reading to each other today, but I am sure that you all have done amazing. We will continue to practice this fluency passage throughout the rest of the week so you can get better. Fluency will be part of our daily lesson so that you all can practice all of these skills on a daily basis with your reading partner. Okay, that brings us to the end of our lesson for today. Let's reflect quickly on what we've learned today. You should be able to answer these kinds of questions with your learning partner. How did we examine shapes and color of a photograph or piece of artwork to understand its meaning? So what were those shapes and the colors, the light and dark, and how did we understand the meaning of that photograph? How did that help us understand the photograph? Number 2, how can you identify capitalization, punctuation, and spacing errors in sentences? So you practice that and you will be able to do it in your exit ticket at the end of this lesson. So I can see that you have mastered the skill. How can you write about the meaning of the photograph? Oh, this is another one that's going to be in your exit ticket. So I'm going to ask you to write a sentence about the meaning of the photograph. What did you think the meaning was? And finally, can you read a passage fluently with expression? So I'm sure you did wonderful today, and you will only continue to get better as we practice that passage throughout the week. One last little bit of information for your learning partners. In case you have any questions or need my help or support with anything in our lessons, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I am here whenever you need me. My office hours, my official office hours are Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. I will be checking my email all day. Each day, and I am happy to meet with you by phone, email, or set up a Zoom meeting if we need to go over something in person with you or your scholar. I am looking forward to being able to help you however I can during this time. Our next steps, look in your email that you received this week, there should be a link to our exit ticket number 2 to answer a few questions. It'll only take a few moments. I've tried to make it as quick as possible. Number 2, give your head, scholars, give your head a little squeeze and say, way to go, brain. You're doing such a good job during this time of learning. Number 3, thank your learning partner for helping you. They are trying to support you and keep your learning moving forward when I cannot be with you every single day. Number 4, homework. Homework again today. Every day I'm going to give you the same homework. Find something to read that interests you for 20 minutes today. It doesn't have to be right this minute. It can be any time that you have during this day. Find something that interests you, a book, a magazine, an online article. Read it to someone that is near you, or over Facebook, or over the phone to your dog, a stuffed animal, a friend, whoever you can read to at this time, so that you can keep your reading skills up. Everyone was making such amazing progress before we went on break. I hate for any of us to lose any of those amazing skills. So I look forward to seeing you all again in our next lesson. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you tomorrow. Goodbye, scholars. Have a good afternoon.